Mr. Riskin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, members of the staff, and public. I want to start off by recognizing some of our employees. So I want to first ask our Director of Sustainable Streets, Tom McGuire, to come forward to recognize one of his staff.
Good afternoon, directors. Tom McGuire, Sustainable Streets Director. I'm here to ask you today to recognize Thomas Moyer, who's a public service trainee, for his remarkable contributions to our Color Curb program. Thomas started last year, took over the responsibilities of a Color Curb program clerk, very quickly learned the challenging job of helping us run the Color Curb program. Within his 1 year of service to the MTA, he has processed more than 2,000 311 Color Curb requests, as well as many more email, phone, in-person requests for Color Curbs, to the point where we think that if you go out and you see freshly painted yellow, white, or blue curb at San Francisco, Thomas probably had something to do with that. And if you see something with that great new MTA logo on it, Thomas definitely had something to do with it. Thomas has also been instrumental in training some new personnel, and passing his expertise on to other members of the team. And we also want to recognize the Human Services Agency. Thomas came to us through HSA's Public Service Trainee Program, which is a program that connects individuals on public assistance with opportunities to work for 6 to 12 months in a job with the city and county to improve job skills, hard and soft skills, and prepare them to enter public or private sector employment in the city. So we're very happy to have been part of the partnership with HSA, but we're mostly happy to have had Thomas on our team for the last year, helping us move the incredible volume of Color Curb requests we have forward.
Good. Thank you very much. Mr. Moore, thank you so much for the job that you've been doing for the agency. It's another one of those unseen jobs that's so important, and we appreciate your work so much, and it sounds like your coworkers also appreciate your amazing baking talents as well. So would you like to say a few words, please?
Well, I'd like to thank you very much for this award. It means a lot to me. I'd also like to thank Mr. Neha for being a great manager to work for. Everyone else I worked with, it's an incredible environment. I really appreciated it. Learned a lot, enjoyed a lot. And I'm wondering, is this worth a lifetime meeting pass? But well, thank you very much.
And thank you.
And next, I want to ask our Director of Transit, John Haley, to come forward to recognize a group of folks who are involved with a much more visible part of the SFMTA operation.
Mr. Haley.
Good afternoon, Ed and board members. I'm going to introduce you to 22 individuals who did a remarkable job some time ago on the morning of May 25th, the Friday of Memorial Weekend. We heard a sound that is one of the worst sounds that you could ever want to hear if you're in the rail passenger business. And that is you may not recognize that, but that is in fact something called a derailment alarm that occurs on the vehicle. And just after 6:30 on Friday morning, that alarm sounded, which told us in our vernacular that we had a 732, which is a derailment of an outbound train leaving Castro Station. The good news right away was that there were no injuries. The train had serviced the station, and it immediately activated the emergency response unit. The individuals that you see standing, I was going to say behind me, but our rehearsal was brief and unfocused, so they were standing to the side. But what I would like to do is to describe for you, if I may, the fact that this is an 80,000-pound vehicle, Breda LRV, which the center trucks, there are 3 trucks on the Breda car. The front and the back trucks carry the weight from the motors, and the center trucks are supported by 2 airbags, which look like, if I could describe it, 2 donuts on top of each other that are inflated and serve to stabilize the suspension system. We know right away from looking when the first mechanic arrived on the scene, the cause of the derailment was determined to be the airbag, a valve on the airbag which regulates the amount of air in and out of the bag. Was left in the in-between position, so over a period of hours, the air gradually leaked out. The bag began to flatten, and when the train left the station at Castro, where you begin in automatic, where you begin to climb, the center trucks came off the rail. So this crew, led by the gentleman on my left, is Randy Katnack, who was the quarterback of the emergency response unit, and who, over a period of time, devised first a plan that would involve first assessing the damage, second, then bringing in work equipment, and also, once the damage was assessed, you have an unstable 80,000-pound piece of metal, which then has to be raised very carefully. It's unstable. Has to be cribbed. In other words, take pieces of wood that were brought in to support it. It has to then be raised or jacked safely. And all throughout that, you have to stop several times and make sure it's stable because you have individuals on there trying to recover the train. So over a period of just roughly an hour, once they got there, conducted several job briefings. First, the rail mechanics. Next to Randy is Dennis Callahan. Dennis was Randy's right-hand man in terms of teamwork, collaboration, and coordination because the track department both supported the recovery effort to get the train back up on the rail and then quickly stepped in, inspected the rail to make sure there was no damage, did in fact replace some clips on the rail, and got us back in service. So I would just, this is, my description probably does not do the work of these individuals justice. This is not only a Herculean feat, but a remarkable effort of skill, ingenuity, and planning with careful and continued focus and persistence on safety. Not only their own safety, but the safety of the riders to make sure that once the train was up, we were able to move it out. We put test trains in. So it is truly an honor for me to introduce you to this group, both a combination of rail mechanics and folks in the track crew. And Randy, do you want to add anything to this?
It was really nice.
Sorry, could you speak in the microphone? Thank you.
It was really nice working with all these guys because, I mean, we were able to put this many guys in the same group and nobody got injured. We practiced all safety rules. We had safety briefings one after another every time another person would get added to the group or somebody would leave to make sure we kept our head count and everybody was safe when we got this job completed. And so just wanted to thank everybody here for that also. And without the guidance of our boss, John Haley, I don't think we could have done it either because he really presses us to do job briefings and safety briefings. So we just took his leadership on that. So thank you.
I love a guy who stays on script. Dennis, anything to add?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What Randy was saying is true. We take pride in safety. We work together a lot in other aspects, not just derailments. And these are professional people behind me. And I'm proud to be a supervisor for the track department. I'm proud to work with these guys every day. We don't look for accolades. We love what we do. So for us to get this is an honor. That's it.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Haley, do you want to have anyone else come forward, or do you want to?
Actually, make one final comment on Dennis. Dennis actually walks the walk, and just as he said, because I lost a gentleman's wager to Dennis on the over-under of how long it would take them to re-rail the train. He made me look bad, but again, he backed it up. And finally, I would say that this played out. There were some challenges. A work train broke down. They had to unload equipment onto another train. It was quite an arduous task. But after sometime around 12:15, we were able to get everything cleared and inspected. And Lanier?
I'd like to say the 713 all the way around and 12:15.
So thank you.
Thank you all so much, gentlemen and lady. We're not just all gentlemen here. What an amazing team. You seem to not only work together well, you practice for a drill like this, that it's unfortunate you have to do it, but it's great that you practice for it. And it sounds like you all work together so well to keep the system and recover the system and keep things moving. So on behalf of the board and indeed the entire city and all of our riders, thank you so much for the work that you do, and thank you for doing it safely. Thank you for winning the bet with John Haley on how quickly you could do it. And thank you so much for coming in today.
So as they're making their way out, I'll just note that this was not only a tremendous physical feat to move this 80,000-pound vehicle, but it was in very tight quarters, and it was with the immense pressure of the service that was being significantly disrupted in the process. I do want to credit our communications folks and a lot of other folks who jumped into action to help folks get around the situation for that Friday morning. But it was under immense pressure and difficult circumstances that they did this, and the fact that they did it so well, they did it safely, is just a testament to their skill and professionalism. So we're lucky to have so many workers like that. Next, I want to invite up another familiar face. As you know, the future of our city are our children, and the future of Muni ridership are our children. And we're very fortunate to have an SFMTA alumni whose passion has continued since he has retired from SFMTA service. And I think this was actually, Chair Brinkman, your suggestion after learning about what he's been doing to invite him here to share what he's been doing with all of you and the public. So, Peter Albert.
Mr. Albert, welcome back.
Good afternoon, Chairman Brinkman, members of the board. At the same time, I'd like to invite up three people who are going to co-present with me. So Lydia and Cifredo and Denise, if you wouldn't mind getting up and standing behind me, that'd be great. So I am Peter Albert, retired SFMTA, and thank you for inviting us to come down and talk about this transit course idea that has been a lot of fun. I'd like to begin by explaining why we talked about this. We live in a city, and it can be tough on families or it can be fantastic for families. And we see Muni and the walkable sidewalks as really critical infrastructure to help children learn how to get independent, how to have a healthy growth, how to enjoy the city and embrace the city for all it can offer you when you're a city resident. But we also know that kids need to be safe and they need to feel safe. It's excellent that we're coming on the heels of that presentation about safety. But also, not every parent can take the time to orient their children as they're going from, let's say, elementary school to middle school and learning how to ride Muni by themselves. And too often, the parents have these difficult choices. They either chauffeur their kids everywhere, or they turn their kids loose on Muni, cross their fingers, and hope for the best. Neither one of those options are optimal. Both of those options are stressful. This course was aimed to support families by empowering kids and entrusting kids with responsibility. And we believe that if we guide kids and we give them a chance, that they'll measure up to our expectations. So the course had four basic parts. I'll go real quickly through those four parts, and then we're going to hear from three speakers. It began with a mapping exercise. Each kid was given a blank sheet of paper and a pencil, and we asked the kid, draw where you are in the city. Draw your closest transit station. Draw your walk from where you are to that transit station. Of course, that was difficult for people to do from memory. We said, don't sweat it. Pay attention to what you didn't get as you're trying this exercise over the span of the week that follows. Go back and fill in those gaps. Be more aware of your environment. Be clear about what it is to walk through the city, crosswalks, stop signs, and all that. The next thing we did was we put together a list of good and bad. And by good and bad, we mean good behavior, good conditions, bad behavior, bad conditions. The good included drivers who are welcoming people on the bus, or polite riders, people being considerate to seniors, to people with disabilities, to pregnant women. Was the train overcrowded? Was it dirty? Did we have to wait a long time? What were the sidewalk and crosswalk conditions going to the transit stop? And for listing the bad, it was important because we're really trying to help children feel more in touch with their intuition. To be safe on a train is to really know where you feel comfortable, know that the driver's there to help you, the station agent, and then to be aware of themselves and understand with your cell phones, with your Clipper card, what can happen if you're not very attentive. And that they can contribute by being more self-aware to a better and safer Muni ride. And then we did the ride. So we had after-school enrichment program, and Lydia will represent that. We had 826 Valencia, represented by Cifredo. And Denise Donaldson, a parent of one of the St. Brendan students, will talk about her experience. We all rode Muni Metro to Forest Hill Station. And somewhere between Forest Hill Station and Castro is the Ghost Station. Someone's going to talk a little bit more about that, but that was the highlight. But really what we saw was observing kids who knew how to behave and knew how to watch for behavior, documenting what they were seeing, understanding what Muni can mean for them, and then we wrapped it up with a debrief. We came back together, we added to that good and bad list, we talked about the fun that we had, we talked about how these students are the ambassadors for a better city tomorrow. So I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to invite Lydia to come up and talk about her experience as a member of the after-school enrichment program at McKinley School.
Welcome, Lydia.
Thanks. Okay, I'd like to share with you my positive experience in the pilot Muni course given to our after-school program ASEP this December. The course was taught by Peter Albert, who used to work as a planner for the SFMTA, so he had a lot of great information to share with us. I think a lot of students could learn very important skills from this course, such as how to ride Muni alone to and from school, how to be careful and courteous on Muni, and how to enjoy public transportation and maybe not need a driver's license later on. Next year, I will be starting 6th grade at Hoover Middle School and will be taking Muni home some days. The Muni course taught me about planning my route and making transfers. When I travel home from school next year, I will have to transfer from the L at the Castro station to the 24 bus onto Visadero. So the tips Peter shared with us will be really helpful. I will also hopefully have a phone by then that I can put the Muni app onto, which is great because you can see when the bus or train is arriving next. I'm feeling much more confident about taking Muni by myself next year. Another important skill that Peter taught us during the Muni course was how to be safe and polite while riding the bus or a train. He gave us tips on looking for available seats and being aware of who we were sitting next to. If something starts to feel or seem strange, it's okay to get up and move closer to the driver or just to a different part of the bus or train car. Also, he told us to be aware of people who may need our seat, such as someone elderly, disabled, or pregnant, and to offer our seat to them when they get on. I think these examples of how to be safe and responsible on Muni were some of the most valuable parts of the Muni course. A part of the course that I really enjoyed was looking for the Ghost Station. I tried to show it to my mom while we were riding the L, but she can't seem to see it. Also, I really appreciate the idea that if more people in the city use public transportation, there will eventually be less cars on the road and less pollution. For me, being more comfortable riding Muni helps me enjoy the experience more, looking out the window and seeing the surroundings. It will be a long time before I can get a driver's license, and this knowledge will help me be an independent traveler. So in closing, I think the Muni course taught by Peter Albert was a very valuable experience that all students can benefit from. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia.
Hello, my name is Sigifredo Ruelas. One of the experiences that I learned on the Muni trip is that people with disabilities and pregnant and elderly people need to have a seat. Now that I know that, I would give a seat to them. The first trip that I took, I understood the Muni map. Another thing I learned is that now I know the streets near Dolores Park. We took the J Church. I thought the driver was kind because when we were getting off the Muni, he waved goodbye and showed his teeth with a big smile. Thank you, Peter, for giving us this fun trip, and to the Muni for letting us get on the train and teaching us something new. Lastly, thank you all for coming on this very special day.
Thank you so so much, Rafaela.
Hi, my name is Denise Donaldson. I'm a parent. I'm not checking my email. I just have my notes on my phone. I'm a parent of 2 children at St. Brendan's School. My oldest is a rising 5th grader, and my husband and I use the public transportation all the time, and we want our children to use it and to feel safe and comfortable using it. When I heard that Mr. Albert had given a Muni tour to rising middle schoolers, I'd asked a friend of mine to put me in touch with him, a friend who knew him, and asked him if he would be so kind as to give my daughter's Girl Scout class a tour. And he said he would. Most of the girls in the school are familiar with Muni, but they probably don't use Muni very frequently. Everybody had used it, but they didn't use it very frequently. It was great to see them have a mature conversation about the good and the bad parts of Muni, and to identify an amazing amount of good aspects of Muni, and just to have the awareness of various concerns that they should keep in their mind. It made me very comfortable as a parent to see this sense of empowerment in the children. And probably 2 of the biggest takeaways that I saw all of the girls have was that if they're using Muni alone, they should sit near the driver. And they all thought that was a great idea. And also something that Mr. Albert reinforced with them a number of times was to listen to your instinct. If there's somebody who looks sketchy, stay away from them. And that was just brilliant for these 5th graders to hear that from somebody other than a parent. And so it was just great for children who aren't very familiar with public transportation. It was a great program.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think you got the idea of how much fun this all was. I want to wrap up by thanking the MTA board. I definitely want to thank Paul Rose. Paul actually came to the first graduation class of 2018 in this class, and they got some really nice swag. We got this really cool Muni bag, so that every time you're shopping or whatever, and you want to know how to get home, that's on the map. So I think every one of the students got that. Bart also gave away some complimentary pins, so Bart was a partner in this as well. And we look forward to this being something that isn't just a one-off, but maybe an ongoing thing that happens with everybody who wants to learn how to use Muni, but just doesn't feel comfortable with it without some guidance. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Albert. And kids, Lydia, Rafaela, Ms. Donaldson, thank you so much for coming down and sharing your experiences with us. We work very hard to make sure that you feel comfortable riding the system and that Muni goes where you need to go. So I'm so pleased that you're going to be able to take advantage of it more as you grow older. And you'll share it with all your friends and tell everybody how amazing Muni is. And Peter, thank you so much. Thank you for coming down, and thank you for continuing to support our public transit system in your retirement.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks again, Peter, for coming and for that work. We definitely want to figure out how to scale and sustain and grow that. So a number of other things I want to touch on, some relating to past things that you have either acted on or asked about. So first, with regard to Vision Zero, we hear often, and I'm sure we'll hear by at least one member of the public, about educating people about riding bikes on the sidewalk. I think it was Vice Chair Heineke who asked us to come back and kind of respond to that ongoing issue that we hear about, which I think was really brought to life even more when the scooters hit the street. So just in short, we do fund and manage bicycle education classes, and sidewalk riding rules, meaning that you can't ride on sidewalks, are part of the curriculum of every class. We fund bicycle outreach activities that include a no sidewalk riding safety message on postcards that are handed out, as well as on a spinning prize wheel. We are going to be looking to use our social media outlets to communicate about sidewalk riding over the summer and into the fall. And long-term, the Vision Zero education and communication strategy includes a program to educate bicycle riders on how to ride safely, and we will ensure that sidewalk riding is prominently included in the campaign. So we agree with the concern that it's not safe, and it puts pedestrians, particularly more vulnerable pedestrians, at risk, and we will certainly do everything we can to continue to encourage responsible behavior of people on bicycles, as we expect of all other road users. And speaking of scooters, last week, or maybe it was the week before, on May 24th, I joined City Attorney Dennis Herrera and Director of Public Works Mohammed Nuru to announce the next steps regarding the shared powered scooters in San Francisco, which is what we're calling them. As you know, the city law was unanimously passed by the Board of Supervisors and signed into law by Mayor Mark Farrell, that essentially says that any company that is operating these shared powered scooters must have a permit from the city in order to access the public right of way. In compliance with this new law, which took effect yesterday, any scooter company that was operating in the city needed to have a permit to operate. And since none of them have permits up to this point, the three that had been operating have removed their scooters from the city sidewalks. We did, when we had our announcement on May 24th, made available an application for a new permit that we developed and that you authorized at, I guess it was our May 1st SFMTA board meeting. The applications for this first pilot, which you'll recall restricted the number of scooters and companies, the due date for those applications is 5 p.m. on Thursday, June 7th, and we'll review those as expeditiously as we can, and with the hope of being able to qualify companies for permits by the end of the month. I will, just to manage expectations from our experience with previous similar permit programs, it took a lot of back and forth between our staff and the permit applicants to get the applications in a state of completeness such that we could consider them for a permit. So I would say that the end of June is a target, but it's an optimistic one in my mind. So in tandem with the new system, we've established a 12-month program to collect data, evaluate, and assess whether further, basically what to do going forward relative to the public interest in terms of continuing as is, expanding, terminating, but we hope to learn a lot during these 12 months. We hope to have successful applicants and be able to issue permits so that we can allow that service to come back, but in a safe and responsible way, and give us an opportunity to evaluate it. So that's the latest with scooters. It's been a very lively public topic. There are a couple of things. Today's election day. Hope everybody voted. There are a couple of measures on the ballot, both state and regional, that are of relevance to transportation in the city and in California. I'm not going to go over them. I just would encourage everyone to vote today. I did want to note, this was in request to another inquiry, I think also from our vice chair, regarding NextBus performance. And while generally I believe, given the age of the system, that it is performing as it should, we did have some issues at the beginning of May that may have been what you and other riders noticed. And basically what happened was that we had a problem within our overall information network that was caused by a software loop that brought portions of the network down. And that things that ride on that network include the NextBus system. It includes some of our traffic signals that are connected via the city fiber. It includes some communication systems and camera systems. So it had pretty widespread impact. We didn't immediately identify the root cause, but recognizing that since we didn't identify it, it could happen again, we took some steps to essentially mitigate that or minimize any damage. And in fact, the next day we had another incident, but much smaller in scale because of the steps we took. So we are bringing in somebody from the outside to do a full evaluation of our network. There are some aspects of our network architecture that we were in the process of addressing, and we think some of those issues might, not having been addressed yet, may have been relevant in this outage. But I do want to assure that even with the inconvenience it caused and the problems it caused, there was no time where there were any safety issues within the subway or elsewhere. Almost every system we have either has a backup or fails in a safe mode. So it was mostly an inconvenience issue, and we'll continue to work to make any changes we need to make to our IT infrastructure to make it more resilient and resistant to any such outages. Moving forward, June 16th is a big day for Muni. It is in part because it's when our general sign-up goes into effect. The general sign-up is an opportunity for all of our transit operators every couple of years to choose to work in a different part of Muni, and often we align changes that we're making to that sign-up period. So a few significant things are happening as a result. One is that we'll be putting our new Islayas Creek motor coach facility, a new bus operations and maintenance yard, into service. We will, it'll be the first new bus facility for this agency in more than 3 decades. And it's one that if you're riding Caltrain, you can see as you pass over Islayas Creek. It's a state-of-the-art facility. It's an 8.4 acre yard. It's LEED certified. There's solar panels on the roof. It'll house 120 buses. And most importantly, it'll be a much better workspace for our operations and maintenance staff, and a facility that will allow for more efficient maintenance of the buses. There also is a community room there that will be open to the public. And so we're just excited to have this new facility. The reason why it was needed is that by the end of next year, we will have expanded the fleet by more than 80 buses, including some 40-foot buses that are being replaced by 60-foot buses. So we had been outgrowing our existing spaces. So this getting this new facility into service will be welcome. Part of that, what that will support, are service increases that will be going into effect as authorized by this board and approved in the budget. Informed by the Muni Equity Service Strategy, there are a number of Muni lines that are getting service upgrades on June 16th. We'll also be adding service to Muni Metro Rail during peak hours with really across the board. There'll be more frequent service. There'll be longer trains in some cases. Some of our express lines, such as the 1AX and BX and the 8AX and BX, will have increased frequency. The 9Rs, 9 Rapid, will go to 60-foot buses. And again, a number of different Muni lines that serve our equity strategy neighborhoods will see increased service. Many of these service increases will go into effect this June. Some will go into effect later in the summer. And as part of this work, the historic streetcars yard, when we did the re-railing of the Green Yard, which is the facility down at Balboa Park, will be now moving back to the Cameron Beach Yard, back to their home. And then finally, also on June 16th, we will more fully start service at the new Salesforce Transit Center. We have been kind of piloting the 5 local service there on weekdays 7 to 7, but starting on June 16th, the Muni Bus Plaza, which is on the ground floor between Beale and Fremont, will be brought up to full operations, which means it will have, in addition to the 5, it'll have the 5R, it'll have the 7, the 38, and the 38R. So those changes, those buses, which are all currently terminating at the temporary terminal outside about a block away, will now be coming into the bus plaza. This is being done in advance of the transit center opening. It's currently scheduled to open in mid-August, at which point the bus deck, where the AC Transit buses, the 25 Treasure Island bus, as well as a few other more regional lines will be fully operational, and that's when the center will fully open. But since our plaza was ready and so are we didn't want to wait. So we're taking the opportunity of our sign-up to start service there on June 16th. And then last note on Muni service. Back late last year, we were authorized by the California Public Utilities Commission to put the first of our new light rail vehicles in service. That was the first car. We now have more than 20 cars that are here and authorized for service. Many of them are being used for training and maintenance and are being burned in. But you'll be seeing more and more of those out on the lines, particularly after June 16th. And just a few weeks ago, we got authorization from the CPUC to run 2-car trains. It was a separate certificate or an additional certification needed for that, but we have received that. And tomorrow, our first 2-car train will be entering into service. So another big milestone for the new train procurement, and you'll be seeing a lot more bus and train service starting on June 16th.
Good.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Director Riskin. Directors, do I have questions or comments? Vice Chair Heineke?
I have a few, but I'm happy to wait for public comment if you prefer.
No, let's go ahead. Why don't you go first? I'll move to public comment next.
Okay. So thank you for looking into the next bus thing. I appreciate the response and the progress there. And just going through the sort of litany of many things that we covered. So on the derailment, so kudos to the team and for the safe response and for the quick response. I was on the system that day, and it seemed like it could have been a lot worse than it was as far as system impact. My understanding was that the derailment was caused because a pump on essentially the air bladder in the middle of the train was left in a sort of intermediate position.
The valve that is an open or closed valve was left in the intermediate position, so it was not apparent because it allowed for a slow leak.
Okay, and can you tell us what steps we've taken to make sure that that doesn't happen again?
Yeah, so there are additional checks that we've put into the maintenance routines to make sure that that valve, among other things, is checked. The good news is on the new cars, they don't have these airbags, so this whole kind of configuration will not be an issue on the new trains. But it's additional steps in the maintenance process that we are taking to make sure to reduce the likelihood that something like this recurs.
Okay. The training course for the children is an amazing idea. Good for you and for Peter for doing that. And it, sort of reminds me of conversations I've had with my own children and prompted the question I have, which is, what do we tell our drivers about, how do they have any special responsibility to look out for children on the bus? I assume the answer is no. But if we're teaching the children to sit near the driver or to, make some sort of contact with the driver, I don't know, but it would seem to me that we should certainly involve the drivers in that conversation, the operators, so that they know what we're telling the children so that they can react to it, I think, beforehand and give us input and maybe say that's not something I can take on or that may interfere with my safe operation of the vehicle, but more importantly, just so that they're aware. Because I think it is absolutely critical, and I've certainly told my children this, that, in any instance you can, sit near the operator. And if there's a real problem, ask the operator. But I think what Peter's doing is wonderful. I would encourage us to use our outreach team to go to schools, particularly middle schools, where we're really educating people for the first time. And I would encourage you with Peter to involve the union and the operators in this to get their input so that they know what we're saying, they can input on what we're saying, and they understand the responsibility that we're teaching to our children that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think engaging the operators in this process is a great idea. If you like, our marketing and communications director could just give you a little bit of what we are doing currently in schools beyond this, if it would be helpful.
Sure. She and I have ridden the bus with our children many times, haven't we, Candace?
That's very true. So good afternoon, directors. Candace Sue, Director of Marketing and Communications from SFMTA. So each year, for the last 2 years, we have put on a program focused on rising middle schoolers with SFUSD called Middle School Step Up. And as part of that program that happens in both the spring or around this time at the end of school and then in the fall, we help teach children who are going to be going into middle school or at middle school about how to walk on the street safely, follow the traffic signs, and ride Muni. And that program has had a very good response and just gives us a chance to share some safety tips with the children and also with the teachers. And we also tell them about Free Muni for youth as well. One of our messages is not necessarily to sit next to the driver. So I think if we were to incorporate that more formally, we would absolutely take your advice to ensure that our operators are aware of that messaging. I think in this particular case, this was.
Well, and so that all sounds wonderful. There are a lot of other schools outside the Unified School District too that you could reach out to as well that I would love this. And I will say from my own personal experience, the liberating effect for middle schoolers and high schoolers of Muni, it's, you know, I grew up in LA, you had to wait till your driver's license for that. And they have it here at a much earlier age and it's wonderful. But I do think it would be a good idea to involve the operators and see what they say and see what they're willing to commit to and then work it in with the training that's going on. So thank you very much for that. Sidewalk bicycle riding. Thank you for addressing it and putting it into the social media and the training and all that. I suppose that one of the responses to that is going to be, that's all fine and good for the responsible people who pay attention to social media and go to the training. And I would encourage one, I think it's a small further step, which is simply signage. I suspect our planners know, I certainly know where I see people ride bicycles on the sidewalk more than other places. It tends to be on one-way streets where they can't ride with traffic, so they ride up the sidewalk. I see that on Post Street all the time, to just pick an example. I don't think it should be based on my personal anecdotes, but to the extent our planners know or we're getting citizen feedback on where there are particular hot spots of sidewalk bicycle riding, that might be a very good place for a sign that says you can't ride the bicycle on the sidewalk and cites the, you know, the code section, so that folks know, and not just the bicycle riders, but that this pedestrians know that that sidewalk is theirs and it's okay for them to tell someone riding a bike, you know, hey, that's against the law. So I appreciate everything you said you do, and I would encourage that as one additional step. And then finally, on the scooter regulation, good for you for moving forward so quickly. I think when that program left this board, we left an awful lot to both the companies and to staff, you know, to sort of say, here's the very general idea of what we want out of this program. And so I, for one, as a board member, would appreciate a report back as to how that's going, and it can be through your director's report or however. But I think we're going to want to know how the companies are sort of responding to some of these, how they're meeting them, and how you are prioritizing the permits. And I don't mean to air the whole permit process out in front of the board, but I think this is obviously a very important safety issue and something that we're doing quickly. So if we could ask for a report back on how the companies are meeting the challenges that we gave them, I personally would appreciate that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. By the time we next meet, we will have our deadline to receive the applications will have passed, so we'll know who submitted them, how many we have, and what the quality of the applications are, so we can give you an update at the next meeting, at least a light one. And then by the time we next meet, we may have been in a position to issue permits.
Right. Or in a position to deny permits because the criteria we've set out haven't been set forth. And I think that's one of the things I'd be most interested to see is, you know, how we're faring on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good, thank you. And as with many things we do, I'm sure other cities will be watching our electric scooter permitting process, so it'll be good to let everyone know what's going on. Director Hsu, any comments or questions? Director Rupke? No? All right. I'll just say before I move to public comment that thank you so much for the report. It's fascinating to hear about. The non-Muni presentation was fantastic, and I really look forward to us to continuing to work on how we're going to flesh that out. What behave civilly and safely on our system. It's a lesson that probably a lot of the adults could use as well. So having said that, we will move on to public comment. Ms. Boomer.